So I'm very happy to be here with you all. And Heart Smart is the title of my presentation today. It is a phrase that came up when my oldest was identified as able and talented or as gifted when he was in first grade. And it came up because he had a lot of questions about what it meant to have that identification. And we spent a lot of time not just talking about what it meant intellectually or how his brain worked, but also about how his heart worked and what we considered as a family important and what we wanted to focus on. Also, the more that I learned as a mom of being a mom of gifted children, that it was more than the intellectual ability that he and his sibling had, but it was also how he embraced the world, how he experienced stimuli coming in, and the changes that even at that young age he wanted to make. I chose this quote. It is my oldest probably favorite book, and something that I really felt when they were little focused on being heart smart, and a book that we read quite a bit. Some of you out there may have seen this before. This is a comparison between gifted students and bright students. I'm including this today because I think that we don't always recognize the difference between the two, especially in a school setting. And some of those things can get in the way of the social emotional development of our children. This is actually spanned on a couple of slides. For this first one, while this is all really important, what I want to draw attention to is that the bright learner is attentive. A gifted learner is mentally and physically involved. And I'm going to add emotionally involved in the content that they are learning. And they really can embrace everything from all aspects. It's kind of a 3D situation for them. They are all in when they are learning something, and it affects them on all different levels and can cause sometimes confusing behaviors or reactions for us as parents, but also in the classroom setting when a gifted learner is so emotionally connected to the material, and they can have an emotional response, maybe to the material itself or the topic, or if something isn't completely studied the way they want it to, or if others don't see the things in the complete way that they do. They listen with interest, or bright learners do. And our gifted learners show strong feelings and opinions. Again, part of that heart smart. Sometimes those strong feelings are a little frightening for others around them, and their opinions are not welcome in the classroom setting. And that can be little pinpricks to them as learners, because this is who they are and how they're expressing themselves. But definitely something that's a difference between a bright learner and a gifted learner. The bright learner learns with 6 to 8 repetitions to master the material, and a gifted learner learns it in 1 or 2, which means they spend a great deal of time in the classroom bored, and their heads are going other places and they're thinking about other things. And sometimes that affects them deeply in the heart when they are so excited to learn things. And it can also cause behaviors and things to happen in the classroom or in the home setting or out in public that may not be understood by others. And oftentimes they're disappointed because they want to go to school and be excited and learn things very much. And then they get there, and what they envisioned in their mind's eye isn't what's actually there for them. And it can be very disappointing for them in the school environment. The second set of information that I want to draw attention to, the difference between a bright learner and a gifted learner. The bright learner is receptive. A gifted learner is intense. And again, this is because of how he or she is taking in all the stimuli, all the information that is being presented to them, and they're picking up all these things rapidly, and sometimes even in a way that they're not quite aware of. And that intensity, which we're going to, in a few minutes, spend more time on, can be a bit much for others if they don't understand the gifted learner. And it can also be a bit much for the gifted learner if they don't understand themselves. And that's a piece that we're also going to talk about. The bright learner enjoys school. The gifted learner enjoys learning and is always learning wherever they are, at home, in social situations, at school. They are always out learning things and very often teaching themselves what they want and feel that they need to know. I also want to draw attention to the bright learner is alert and the gifted learner is keenly observant. And what I have seen in my experience, both with my own children and the students I work with, is that they are almost hypervigilant. They are watching and taking everything in, not just what the other person wants to present to them. So they're very focused on everything that's happening in their environment, to the point where it might even seem that they're not listening. They are. They're just focused on everything that's happening and not necessarily what the speaker thinks is most important at that time. A bright learner is pleased with his own learning, and a gifted learner is highly self-critical. And that can be a sucker punch to parents oftentimes if we have a child that is critical to the point that they're in a lot of pain because of that. And they have trouble moving on from certain situations or events, or it seems that they're never pleased with themselves. And we, of course, as moms and dads, are providing them with lots of love and care, and we're not sure where it comes from. And part of that is part of who they are as learners, and understanding that and helping them understand that can help them modulate some of that self-critical feelings and talk, and help them replace that with more affirming thoughts and feelings towards themselves. Oftentimes, there is a misconception that the bright learner actually is the gifted learner. And teachers, educators, and even parents, family members can be confused and not realize that we have a gifted learner, because they're not as easy of a student oftentimes in the classroom as the bright learner is. So understanding these differences can be really helpful for us as parents as we are advocating for our children. Some of you may have seen this before. I find this really helpful. This is from a book called When Gifted Kids Don't Have All the Answers, The 8 Big Gripes. I have shared this with students over the years, and whether they're 8, 12, 16, all of these gripes run true, and every student has, maybe not all 8 of them have been something they've experienced, but I would say about 75% of them are things that they've experienced. And oftentimes, if I'm in a counseling situation, I'll spend time talking about these things and what resonates with you as a learner, and what do you think we need to do to help you with this? I think for me, the one that helps students the most is number 1. No one explains what being gifted is all about. It's kept a big secret. And that happens for a lot of reasons. I think that some people don't want kids to know they're gifted because they're concerned that it will cause them to feel superior to others. Some just don't know how to explain what gifted is, or think that kids already understand it. But because there's so many nuances and differences in being gifted, when we don't let them know what it is, they often feel that things are wrong with them. And they're very concerned about what they're feeling and what they're experiencing. And we can help them with that from the get-go if we're able to help and inform them at age and ability where they are, experiential wise, at their level to understand. So what we're going to tell a 6-year-old isn't what we might tell a 12-year-old, but we're going to shape it to where they are so they can help understand that. They often will say that they feel different and alienated. And I see that again as compared to connected to number one, no one explains what being gifted is all about. It's being kept a big secret. Number 8, we worry about world problems and feel helpless to do anything about them. That's always been something. I have been in my role now for almost 3 decades, and that has always been something with the gifted children I've worked with that has come up. But especially over the last 2 to 5 years, that has been with lots of world events, from climate change to COVID. Lots of things are coming up that kids feel helpless about. So giving them tools and opportunities to discuss those things make a big difference for them. One of the biggest factors that is helpful for us and for children to understand about gifted learners and our gifted children is asynchronous development. This originally was called dysynchronous development. That was changed because when we put a DYS in front of something, it has a negative connotation. And while this can complicate the life of a gifted child, it's not negative. Once we understand what it is, we can put things in place to help them and to help us and help us advocate for our students so educators understand it as well. It was coined by a psychologist, a French type psychologist named Tracier. He explained that asynchrony is the uneven rates of intellectual, psychomotor, social, and emotional development. It's essentially being or feeling out of step for the child. It can be confusing because we can have a 10-year-old that cognitively is talking and speaking and doing the work of a 16-year-old, but emotionally they're at age 6 and physically they're at age 8. But in fact, their chronological age is 10. That can be really confusing. So when an educator is having a conversation with our child and they are way beyond where everyone else is, and so it seems like, again, they're very high functioning, and then 3 minutes later, they're arguing with a classmate, and it seems to be a very immature argument, and they start having a fit, and that behavior doesn't match with the expectation of the cognitive ability that's been shown. And then physically, they may be even at a different level. So it can be confusing when we're parenting and we're having a very in-depth conversation with the child and they seem, again, to really get it. And then a half hour later, they're fighting with a sibling and throwing things or crying or having a tantrum. We can think, what just happened? I was able to talk to you a little bit ago about a really big topic, but right now I can't because you're not being reasonable. And part of that is the asynchronous development. Understanding that saves us a lot of heartache and frustration. And it also keeps us from over-responding in a punitive way when a child is simply responding at the level that they are, whether it's emotionally, physically, or cognitively. And I know you're keeping track of questions. I don't know if because this is such a big area, are there any questions about asynchronous development that anyone would have? Okay, keep going then.
Not seeing any questions right now, Amber.
Okay, thanks. Many of you may be familiar with Dabrowski, who was gifted himself, a psychiatrist, an internist, and a psychologist, and Overexcitabilities. This is the piece that when I am working with students and my own children, that they were very excited to learn about, no pun intended, and they were, I think, just so relieved to understand what this all was. And when my oldest was identified as gifted, I wish I had known then all the things that I know now, but this in particular, I was not aware of this at that point and learned about it later, but I think it would have helped me and helped him a lot in the beginning. Both my children have the excitabilities. He definitely has all of them, and a couple are pretty intense, and that has definitely complicated his life. Dabrowski found that overexcitabilities are a temperamental disposition towards a class of stimuli that gifted individual people notice and respond to in a way that non-gifted people don't. It's a lens that opens to facets of the world in a wider and deeper way, again, than a non-gifted person would experience them. It often results in a gifted person reacting to what others would see as a non-event, hence overexcitability. Psychomotor overexcitability is movement. It is rapid speech. Again, motor is the big piece of it. It is restlessness. It's a pressure for action. Oftentimes, people that experience this overexcitability talk very fast. They like to talk a lot. So if you were one of those children growing up, or if you have one of those children growing up, that the feedback is he talks all the time. I'm always having to tell him to be quiet. That would be part of psychomotor overexcitability. People who walk very fast, who need to get somewhere. Knees are always moving. Bodies are always moving. And if they are experiencing an emotional or an anxious moment, then these kick up even to a higher gear. It is not the same as physical ability. So many people have psychomotor overexcitability, and they may not be the star athlete. That's a different area, but it does mean that they're moving a lot and talking a lot. Sensual overexcitability is the senses. These children and individuals are deeply affected by all of the senses and things out there. So they may be affected by clothing tags, by seams in their socks. When I see babies that if you put them on the ground in grass, they're immediately reacting and pulling their hands up. That might be sensual overexcitability. They are very responsive to sound, to light, to smells, to touch, all those different kinds of things. They may be overwhelmed by a sunset. There may be a 5-year-old that is just breath is taken away by a beautiful sunset, and she becomes very emotional by it. Or a child may not be able to get into a car with the neighbor, maybe have them take her to school because the smell of the car is just too much for her and she cannot bear to have that smell. Textures of food, things like that affect this. Intellectual overexcitability, I think this is probably what most people are familiar with and would most readily say, oh yeah, that's part of being a gifted person. This overexcitability lends itself to being avid readers, to possibly always wanting to learn, having lots and lots of questions, having a sharp sense of observation. They very much care about problem solving and symbolic thinking. They can be sometimes a bit trouble for a teacher in a classroom if they are way ahead of everybody else and they're asking lots of questions and they are very excited to learn more and they're at a way higher pace than everyone else is in the class. Imaginational overexcitability is that piece of our imaginations that catch on fire, our children that love fantasy, that are always thinking, daydreaming, coming up with new worlds, that are absolutely overwrought with love for Harry Potter, anything with wizards and fairy tales and all those pieces of it. They may have an imaginary friend as a child. And this is important to know as well, because sometimes imaginary friends can be, if you don't know about this, some people are fine with it, but others may try to shut that down or think about it as something that kids shouldn't have or shouldn't do. They typically grow out of it by around 5 or 6, but it is definitely part of this overexcitability. They also love to tell stories. And sometimes that can be tough if adults are confused or think that children are lying or over embellishing, when in fact it's that imagination that's just really on fire and taking them lots of other places. They will sometimes dramatize, however, to escape boredom. And that can be especially noticeable in if they're in an environment that isn't stimulating for them. Emotional overexcitability is the piece that we have of experience our emotions. These individuals and children are sensitive in a way that others may not be. They are experiencing things at a very intense way emotionally. They love very strongly. They feel for other people. They have a lot of empathy and are always looking for ways often to make the world and other people feel better. Very strong emotions.
Amber, we have a couple of questions about overexcitabilities.
Okay.
A lot of overexcitabilities sounds like there are some overlaps between the executive functioning issues in ADHD or ADHD in general. So how do they differ?
Okay. That is a lengthy conversation. So I'm going to give a response, and I will say that anyone that wants to further talk about this with me, I would love to at any time do that. All of these actually can be misunderstood and misdiagnosed as other issues. We can definitely pathologize overexcitabilities. That being said, someone can also have psychomotor overexcitability and have ADHD. The key is finding someone, a doctor, a therapist, whoever is helping you with that, who really, really understands and knows giftedness, because you're having to sift through a lot to understand this. So I'm really glad that you asked that question and brought it up. You're going to look at a lot of different pieces, including the attentional piece. And if a student is losing attention because they're not stimulated cognitively, if they're not able, can they read a book for long periods of time on a topic they're interested in? Can they focus on other things, but is it just popping up in a classroom? And is the classroom then stimulating and giving them what they need? So I know that's not a perfect answer. I hope that helps a little bit. If at the end, my email will be there, and I would love to talk more about that, because again, it's very individual. I will say the key is being able to have the professionals that are saying that ADHD is a piece of it really understand what giftedness means. And certainly we have students that have ADHD and also are gifted, and maybe also have that overexcitability. So it is complicated.
Thank you, Amber.
Anything else, Kaylee?
There are no other questions right now.
Okay. So social emotional roadblocks, what gets in the way of heart smart kids, or what gets in the way of their social emotional development? Some of these things may look familiar to you. And I'll let you all read this list. These are all things that can get in the way, not just as children, but also as we grow. Probably the one that causes them the most headaches is the disruptive classroom behavior. And that goes back again to the overexcitabilities. Once we know about the overexcitabilities and we educate our children on them, there are ways to help them modulate that. And we can also advocate for our student and help the teacher understand. And while many teachers do get it and understand what it is, and I know we have a requirement that they have to take training, it's a lot to know. And depending on their experience level and their tolerance level, depends on how much we have to educate and help them further understand what that looks like. So these are all important parts. I actually have a slide later towards the end, but my oldest definitely struggled with the questions and the blurting out, and still does as an adult in his 20s. That is definitely a piece of who he is. And I don't know how many of you have seen the musical Hamilton, but there's great music in there and a song that says, "Smile more, talk less." And one of the things that he did during the 3 months that everything was being Zoomed for work, he made a index card and put it on his computer and actually wrote, "Smile more, talk less," to help give him a reminder of slowing down a little bit with that psychomotor overexcitability and letting other people talk and giving himself time just to collect his thoughts before he did. When I look at this as a mom, but also as a therapist, again, I'm going to go down to the excessive self-criticism. That is an area that I worry about very much so, because our children are hearing, especially with the overexcitabilities, a lot of negative messages about that. So you're too sensitive, you're too smart for your own good, you talk too much, you let your imagination go wild. Those are just a few that I've heard children tell me and I've heard adults say. So again, getting in there and helping them with that is very important. The other, often experiencing isolation is another concern that I have and want to make sure that we are helping them with. It's hard when you are seeing things in a way that no one else in your immediate environment is. And they struggle with that. And it's up to us as adults to give them tools and support in helping them with that. So what are the strengths? Because that's what I really want to focus on. Strengths and what we can do to help them with that. Well, they're deeply perceptive. So as we said before, they are reading the room always, wherever that room is and whoever is in it. They're driven by a deep sense of right and wrong. They're concerned about their community and world issues. And they're quick to identify problems, but they're also extremely quick and helpful to generate and implement solutions. And that's a piece that sometimes we don't give them the chance to do. If they are identifying problems, sometimes as adults, we shut that down and we don't let them continue so they can think about, okay, how are we going to solve this? What is it going to look like? When we give them a chance to do that, it's amazing what they can come up with. You may have noticed that sense of humor is on both slides. It is often a roadblock because it can be very adult. It can be sarcastic. It can be critical. And while I hate this word, it is a word that often adults use inappropriate. I don't like that word because it doesn't give concrete or concise definition of what the problem is. And I think that they need that. They need to know exactly what appropriate is and what inappropriate is. But essentially what I see that means is that the audience, know your audience, that it's not right for that audience, and helping them learn their audience will help them go a long way in moving forward and being successful in different environments with humor, as well as other things that they share. They're so loyal and they love fiercely, whether that's you, whether that's another family member or their friends or a special teacher or adult at school. They love fiercely. And that is one of the most wonderful things about gifted children that I enjoy, my own included. Creative and inventive, they identify new ways of doing things, highly empathetic and caring, and intrinsically motivated to learn. That doesn't mean that they necessarily want to learn what is being taught in the classroom, but they do want to learn what they're interested in. And I think a key as a parent is helping keep that flame burning for them. And some get beat down a lot. If they are a divergent thinker, if they question what it said on the roadblocks, if they question teachers, if they show inconsistencies in what is being taught or in what different environments they're in that they hear, then that can cause them some problems, some bumps in the road. And it's up to us to help keep that motivation there, to help them continue to learn new things. It's not always when we want them to. My oldest was getting ready to take one of his AP exams, and I went in to tell him good luck one night. It was probably 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, and I was done. I was really tired. And I went in hoping to see him at least perusing some notes or looking at some things that he needed to remember. And instead he had a electric keyboard on his bed that I've never seen before. He tracked it down. He borrowed it from someone because he had decided that week that he was going to teach himself how to play the keyboard. And that was the moment that he decided that he was going to learn that. He was very motivated to learn. And he did. But it wasn't necessarily the right time for him to be doing that. So given the roadblocks that I've mentioned, and given the strengths that our gifted children have, what can we do to help facilitate that social emotional learning and facilitate having heart smart children? And there's lots of things that we can do as parents. No children come with a set guide, right? When they're born, we often hear people say this. They don't come with a manual or a how to do different parenting things. And gifted children, even more so, because no two are exactly alike. And if you have more than one in your household, then you know, while there are some similarities, they're all going to be a little bit different. And for my two, the challenges that I've had as a mom have been vastly different between the two of them. And as they've grown into adults, the worries that I still have, because that's what being a mom or a parent is about, are vastly different for each of them. But there are some things overall as we look at them that we can do. The first we've spent a lot of time talking about today is helping with intrapersonal understanding. So again, helping them understand themselves. The more they are familiar with who they are and what it means to be a gifted person, the better they are going to be able to handle things that come their way when they get why they are the way they are and what they're about. One of the things that I have done with my children when it comes to the overexcitabilities, I'm not sure if you can see this, it's also going to be on my last page. These are called sensational sensibility cards that Dr. Pat Fahrenkopf, and I'll have the information at the end, designed and are used to help people. There's a whole deck. They're used to help people identify what their overexcitabilities are. And if we were in person today, one of the things I like to do when meeting with parents is have you get in pairs and give you a deck of cards, each a deck of cards, and you can go through and figure out what your overexcitabilities are. If you're not sure, maybe you already are, and then share them with the other person. And then we spend some time talking about it. It can be often a real eye-opener. These are very easy to use, and it's something that a parent can do with students, with their children. I would do it with students to help them understand what those are, as well as understanding the asynchrony and helping them understand other pieces like multipotentiality, which is being good at lots of different things. And that can cause a lot of stress for students because they might be good at a lot of different things, but maybe don't enjoy all those things. And they may hear from someone, well, you're going to do math counts club because you're really, really good at math. And the child may say, but I really, really don't like it. I don't want to do that. Or as they get into high school and they're thinking about college, it can become very overwhelming to decide what they're going to study, what they're going to do, because there are so many avenues that they're interested in or that they have abilities in. So also understanding what multi-potentiality is very helpful. Understanding what a divergent thinker is. When we set up classrooms and the world really is set up for convergent thinking. In other words, a teacher comes in, here's the lesson. Even parenting, we do this. If I have a talk with you because you've done something that I don't want you to do, or there is something I want you to do, I'm going to shape it so I get a certain response from you. Divergent thinkers come up with way out of the box answers and thoughts, and that can be frustrating and bewildering if they don't understand what that is. And again, that goes back to feeling outside of everyone else and feeling isolated. Accepting a child's emotions rather than fixing. And this is a tough one for parents because when our kids come to us with a problem, we automatically often start to come up with solutions to the problem. And what instead is helpful from a mental wellness point of view is simply to listen and affirm what they're experiencing. So, saying that active listening piece that we're all familiar with, I hear you saying that you're really frustrated right now because your friend did X, Y, or Z. And child might say, no, I'm not frustrated. My feelings are hurt. Or no, I'm not frustrated. I'm really, really angry. Whatever the response is, or they might say, yes, I really am frustrated. And it's a matter of affirming and listening and letting them come up with solutions. What are you going to do about it? What do you think you could do next time? What might you try tomorrow? Rather than us getting in and fixing it. Letting them discuss feelings openly. Nothing should be off the table. If they know that certain feelings are tough for us, then they may stop telling us things that they feel. So we want to make sure that we're not shutting down, but we're letting them share, even if they're kind of scary emotions for them and for us. We want to let them struggle through adversity also, rather than fixing it. Because when we do that, it helps them be brave enough to fail and then try again. And that helps if they have perfectionistic tendencies. We want to explore healthy tools for self-regulation. So those things like, what do we do when we are upset? Practicing deep breathing, all those things that we know, counting to 10, that we can do to help us if we're feeling anxious or starting to feel heightened. Reassuring them when they're afraid. And things might seem silly to us as adults or looking at something. And again, going with that asynchrony, thinking, oh, come on, you should know that that isn't scary or that's not going to happen. Years and years ago, there is a book called Caroline. Some of you may be familiar with it. It is about a little girl and a doll that has buttons for eyes. This was extremely upsetting to a third grader who was identified, who was a gifted student, to the point where it became a big thing. And that book was read at the library. Not only that student, but then once I found out about that student and worked with how do we get past these, then what became intrusive thoughts about the book and about the buttons for eyes was going in and talking to the librarians, because this had been a group of gifted students that had heard the book, that probably what the imagery in that book, if they had imaginational overexcitability, that was not a good book to choose, and to please choose a different one. So when they're afraid, we need to figure out where that's coming from and then help them with that. Good health habits is really important. There's a lot of conversation about whether gifted children and people need more or less sleep than others. I've seen different studies. Some say about 20% need less, 20% need more. I do know it's often hard for babies and young children, and then even as they get into school age, adolescents and adults, to fall asleep because their brains are going and everything's happening, and it's hard to settle. So practicing those settling pieces are important. Providing structure in their environment so they have good sleep habits, sleep hygiene, nutrition, hydration. Many students, especially as they enter late elementary years and adolescence, leave their house dehydrated. They don't have anything to drink before they come to school. And having conversations about how much hydration plays a part in our learning and brain functioning and overall moods is super important. Having reasonable expectations rather than applying pressure to perform. And this is hard. One of the things that students will share with me is that their parents will say it doesn't matter what grades they get, but then if they don't get all A's, that there is a lot of problems around that. And I think it's hard sometimes as parents to figure out what is a reasonable expectation and what isn't. And that is going to depend on the individual child. And oftentimes children are putting pressure on themselves, and it's not parents that are putting that pressure on them. The last one is something that teachers talk to me about as something that hinders relationships in a classroom. Helping them express themselves in a way that is self-advocating, but doesn't come across as arrogant, is going to be very helpful for them. So in other words, oftentimes they may say, what we're doing right now is really boring. And it may be, they're way past whatever is happening in that classroom. So then helping them advocate for themselves in a way that explains what the problem is, what might help them be different, or the situation be different for them in a way that isn't going to seem arrogant or get the other person on defense. And we can see this in their friendship relationships as well. Let you take a minute to look at these. Mentoring relationships for gifted children and their emotional development is really important. Giving them lots of different opportunities with different people who are going to understand what their interests are and accept them for who they are is so important, and gives them the opportunity to truly be who they want to be and who they are. Help them find opportunities to do things for other people. A key part of being heart smart. Give them those options and those, even if, it might not seem like something they're going to enjoy right away, give them different ways to do that, and let them know if you're dropping something off to donate, take them with you. If you're going to pick up food for a food pantry, let them look it up. What does that food pantry need? Let them go with you to the store and help them get the groceries, and then again, deliver it. Lots of different opportunities to do that. Partnering with teachers is key. And finding teachers that understand giftedness is also key. So find your helpers at school and who can help you advocate for your child if you feel that they need that and they're not getting what they need.
Amber, we have another question.
Yeah.
Could you give an example of what you might encourage your child to say if they're in a situation where they've already mastered the material?
I would encourage them that depending on their age, they may need their parents' help with that. And so they may need to talk with mom or dad and help so everybody's on the same page. And it may be something that you need to talk with the teacher about, or if there's a gifted coordinator there that you have a relationship with. Because it might be that the parent has to say, hey, how can he or she show that he's got this so we can move to the next thing? I think practicing with the child of, when is it a good time to talk with the teacher? It's not a good time probably when everybody's rushing in the morning, but maybe there's a break time, or after school when they could stay for a few minutes and say, do you have some time that I could talk with you? And say, this is what we're studying, or this is what we're working on, and I already know how to do it. Is there something else that I could learn instead, or want to move past this and learn instead? So I think it's helping them understand that there's a time to talk to an adult. Just like if they want something from you as a parent, there are times when you're not going to be fully present to, when you're on the phone, for example, when you're paying bills, whatever it is that you're doing that isn't the perfect time. So helping them see that. And then saying things like, Mrs. Jones, I would like to schedule a time to talk with you. I have a question and I need your help with something. And then practicing that with them. And again, they may need you for that. And always using those, asking in a way that is saying, to the teacher, I need your help, and definitely not saying, this is really boring. So how can I say it in a way that lets the teacher know that I'm not critiquing the teacher, but it's the content and I need something past that. I hope that helps.
Thank you.
Sure. Providing family playtime is so important because we're all very busy and on different schedules. And of course, what's been going on with COVID over the last almost 2 years now has just added a layer of stress that we haven't had before, that we're all trying to cope with. In parentheses, it says fully present, because what that means is really being there. So phones are down. If we're not watching a movie together, then maybe if we're playing a game, then technology is off, but it's really, really being there in the moment and doing something that's fun. And what that might mean is it's something fun for your child and not as fun for you. As kids get older, their interests are going to change and they're going to come up with things that maybe isn't the most exciting thing that you want to do. But again, you want to practice doing things together. Also pick things that you're not all really good at. So you can show that it's okay to not be really good at something. I'm a terrible bowler, but that was something that we all liked to do together. None of us were my husband's okay at it, but none of us were particularly great, but it was something that we could all do. And because we didn't do it very often, nobody was on a league, it was just fun. So finding time and setting time aside for that is key. A lot of students, especially teenagers, will complain because parents are trying to multitask while spending time with them. So they will be on their phone. They will be looking at work email. They will be texting. And that is really difficult for kids. They really want you to be completely there. And oftentimes, not just during playtime, but just in talk time, that can be hard, because sometimes when kids want you, it's 10 o'clock at night and you're exhausted. Even now, my kids are grown. If something goes wrong in their life, they still call me at 10 o'clock at night, even though they know that by that time I'm whipped, I'm tired, but that's when they're heightened and they want someone to talk to. So those pieces are really important.
Amber, we have another question.
Yes.
How do we deal with a child when they constantly ask for a new activity right after another and another?
Mm-hmm. Have an agenda is something that might work for them. So have a visual. This is what we're going to do. Here's the activity we're going to do. And then after that, it's going to be individual playtime. What are some things that you could do during that time? And help them come up with a list that's on that, and then they can pick from their list. You can remind them. It's going to take practice to help them get to that part where they can do things on their own if they want to keep doing activities. And I think that's what you were referring to. You might have been also saying rushing through the activities, which would be part of that psychomotor piece. But I think make the expectations clear from the beginning. And it's also important that you don't become the entertainment, the only entertainment key. That the point is to have time together, but then they have to learn to have some downtime as well. And they have to learn and practice being relaxed and doing some non-exciting to them, possibly activities or things with everyone else.
Thank you.
Okay. Again, emphasizing strengths. We as a culture, as a world, as parents, whatever industry we're in, we spend a lot more time focusing on weaknesses and things that go wrong. Even when someone says, "How was your day?" If it's someone that we're really close to and we don't have to give that social, "It was fine," or "I'm good" response, we might tend to focus on the negative. So we really want to spend time emphasizing strengths that they have, strengths in our environment, strengths that we have. We want to model that and show that. I have bibliotherapy and cinema therapy on here because it's a great way for us to help our gifted children and teens understand themselves. And also it can foster discussions as a family. Reading for pleasure is huge, and it's a great strategy to reduce stress. Boys especially often trail off on that middle school, beginning of high school, for various reasons. They will mask often their giftedness to fit in with other students. And reading might become something that they push to the side or they don't want to do in front of peers, especially if they've gotten teased for it. So as much as we can encourage this and provide it in a way that is helpful for them, I encourage you to do that. And the movies I mentioned earlier, Harry Potter, there are so many things in there that are great for gifted students, gifted children to talk about themes that are really helpful. I don't know if any of you out there have seen the musical Wicked. That was something that I took my children to when they were in 2nd and 5th grade. And it was the first time I had seen it too. I had just heard about it, but I was blown away by how they both responded to the themes of being different in the play, the friendship piece, connecting to others, helping others. It was a really powerful experience. And when we were in visiting family in Chicago, and when we got back from the play, one of them was just laying on the floor in a sleeping bag. And I went in to, see if they were going to sleep yet. And he just looked at me and said, "Mom, my life is never going to be the same." It just had that big of an effect. And it's still something that we all know all the music to and talk about and had a big moment. So using those two things can be really helpful. Encouraging self-efficacy, that just goes back to, I think I can, I think I can, I think I can. Oftentimes they're not sure and they're afraid to try, especially if they're perfectionists, because they don't want to take that risk. They don't want to take that leap. And the link between self-efficacy and self-esteem is huge. I have to feel like I can do it for me to feel positive about myself and get outside of my comfort zone. For me, just presenting virtually is a huge step outside of my comfort zone. I love talking with parents, but I like doing it in person. I can't see any of you. I can't feel an energy of the room right now or look at your facial expressions. So it's difficult and it's uncomfortable in some ways, but it's helping me grow and it helps me feel more confident when I develop this skill. And that's what I want for my children. It's what I want for all of our children. we want to reinforce a growth mindset. And that's challenging because growth mindset means we fail. And we have to be comfortable with that and letting our children be comfortable with that and us being comfortable with them failing to be able to reinforce that growth mindset. So when things don't go the way they want them to, or we want them to, we want to draw attention to that and emphasize and reinforce, hey, you did a really good job with that. You learned something. I can't wait to see you try it again and see how what you've learned helps you with that. I think I put provide opportunities to serve others twice. So again, you can tell I think that's really important. Working on seeing and accepting shades of gray. Oftentimes, for adults and children who are gifted, it's this way or it's this way. It's black or white, right or wrong, good or bad, and helping them see that there's lots of shades of gray, especially when they're working with peers and educators. Helping identify what is and is not in their control. They often feel very responsible for everything that's happening. Helping find like-minded peers to prevent isolation. Friendship is a tricky thing for them. And I do have a slide I'm going to show in a minute about friendship. They are typically drawn to older peers that may not be gifted, but maybe are very bright. And so they match if they're 8, they might be drawn to a 10-year-old who is brighter than the average 10-year-old. And so it matches that cognitive level, but helping them find them. And it may not be in their school or in their classroom. And that's okay. We can get them. Sometimes it's good to have friends that aren't in our immediate environment, because when we're in school, people only see us one way. And we're very multifaceted, and we need to get out there and have people see different pieces of us. If we take a cooking class because we like to cook, if we do Taekwondo, then that part of us. If we do community theater, lots of ways that we can help kids search out other people who may have their interests and develop friendships that way. Practice gratitude. Those thank you notes are super important. And the thank you notes that we actually handwrite, if handwriting isn't, and I didn't mention this in asynchrony, but oftentimes handwriting is a frustrating thing for gifted students because their brains are going much, much quicker than their hands are. And then they get frustrated with their handwriting ability and what it actually looks like. It doesn't look as good as it did in their hand's eye. So certainly a keyboard is fine, but printing it out and putting it in an envelope and helping them address it and stamp it and taking it to the post office. And then how do we show other ways that we're grateful for things? Maybe we walk over to a neighbor with fresh cut flowers. Maybe we shovel someone's driveway because they were kind to us. Whatever that is, practicing gratitude is helpful, and it helps them focus on lots of other pieces other than themselves. And it also, if they're very worried about world events, it is something tangible, concrete that they can do. Counseling can be really helpful in a lot of different ways. And I put when needed, but I don't want to say that that's only when there's a crisis. Counseling is often helpful just when we need to figure out some things and develop some skills and some self-regulation skills. If we wait until a crisis event, then it can be really difficult to develop some of those other pieces. So think about it if there's an overall feeling that there's just some things that we need to explore and especially build on strength, or if self-esteem is taking a dive and there's some things we can do there. The key about counseling is that you find someone, as I mentioned before, who understands and embraces and loves gifted children, because we don't want to pathologize things that aren't wrong with them. We want to help them find their strengths, understand themselves intrapersonally so they can develop their interpersonal skills and figure out where they are in the world. Any more questions about any of that? Okay.
We do have one.
Okay.
How do you know when counseling is too much? It's followed up with my daughter loves to talk to adults.
Yes, they do. And they often prefer adults than others, people their age. I think that is based on the counseling, again, wanting to spend time and talk with an adult, if that can be done through mentoring relationships, if there aren't things that are interfering with daily mental wellness, then I wouldn't think that counseling would be a necessary piece. So it's when you are worried about things that are interfering with that wellness, when anxiety or symptoms of depression or low self-esteem, if behavioral issues are popping up in the classroom or at home, if there's a lot of arguing happening and you need some help with that, then exploring counseling is very appropriate. And again, having someone who understands gifted children, that therapist can help you navigate how much and how long you would need that. So you may, if you take, in other words, your child to a therapist who gets it, they might say after, 2 or 3 sessions, hey, you know what, they're in a good space. They understand who they are. And some of what the challenges they're experiencing are what gifted people experience. And they're good. So you can continue to bring them because I really love talking to them. But in fact, I don't have any concerns right now, or they've got a good toolbox of things they can do when life is hard. Or you could have someone say, you know what, I am seeing some symptoms of anxiety or whatever it is that's popping up. And I think we have some things that we can work on. So a big part of that is finding a therapist that is informed and you feel comfortable with. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you. We do have one other question.
Sure.
How can I help my gifted 8-year-old play better or get along with his 3-year-old brother?
There is a great book that is great for gifted and non-gifted children. And I'm going to have to think about that. It's written by the same How to Talk So Your Children Will Listen. And there's a book on siblings with that piece of it. If whoever asked this question at the end, my email will be available. If you email me, I will get you. The book is excellent and it has a lot of ways to help siblings get along with each other. It has a lot of practical examples because it is tricky sometimes to help them and develop that patience, but it is definitely something that you want to do. Sibling relationships are how they practice how they're going to deal with other people and friends. So it is something that we definitely want to pay attention to and help them develop those skills. I'm sure you're already doing this, but the big thing that we want to do is make sure that no one is hurting anyone else and always stop if arguments get physical and make sure that we always have those safety rules in place. Because again, when they're little and we get upset and we don't always have the words to express how we feel, and you have that asynchronous development, then they may be responding in a physical way. But I will get the title of the book and the authors if you're interested.
Thank you.
Okay, friendship. This, I know we don't have a ton of time left, but I wanted to put this on here because I think that friendship is something that as parents, we want our children to have friends, and it's really hard if they don't, or they don't have satisfying relationships. And it can be really tricky for our gifted children to have friends because they may not be interested in the same thing that the peers that they're around are. This was developed by Ms. Gross, and talks about the stages of friendship. I do want to say that many gifted children, again, as I said, gravitate towards older children or towards adults. There was a study on gifted girls age 6 to 7, and they were already displaying concepts of friendships that girls of 11 or 12, average girls of 11 or 12 display. So oftentimes our kids are looking for stage 4 and stage 5 way before their peers are. And this can be really, really tough on them. In the primary years, gifted children want trusting friendships, and the average child really just wants a play partner. And so that can be a tough thing. So as much as you can, again, get them out into different activities that are about their interest, and remember that they may have friends that are not their chronological age, and that's okay, is something to think about. And then facilitate those relationships that do pop up. And I think another thing to help them with is, especially as they grow older, gifted people are not going to get everything met in one relationship, but sometimes they want to. They want that best friend when they're adolescents and they're developing romantic feelings for people. They want that person to be the end all be all, and helping them see, especially in your relationships, that we can get things from different people, and that's okay. Model that for them is going to be very helpful. This is very important. Take care of you. Recognize, learn about, and nurture your own giftedness. I cannot tell you how many times in working with students, I have had parents say, "Oh, I'm not gifted." You are. And that's very hard for children actually to hear. They'll come in and say, "I hate it when my mom says that," or "I hate it when my dad says that," because they are gifted and they know that they're like you. And so when you don't accept that piece of yourself, then it feels to them that they're not being accepted, and they don't have a way to learn by your modeling. So it can be painful too, as we're seeing our children suffer with different aspects of being gifted. It can be painful for us if we're remembering back on things that were hard for us at the age they're at, or even that is continuing to be difficult for us. So do that. Learn about yourself and embrace it. Again, you practicing physical, social, and emotional self-care, they're watching everything that we do. And so it can't be do as I say and not as I do, because they're watching and they're paying very, very close attention to all that we are doing. And if we say one thing and do something else, they're taking notice of that. And then we're going to see it show up later for them. Find and embrace your support system. It's really hard being a parent. It is the most important thing that I do. It is the number one way that I view myself and all those other things. And I absolutely love my job, and I'm extremely grateful that I have it, and I'm very passionate about it. But the number one role I have, even with grown children, is still, it's being their mom. And I'm incredibly grateful that I have both of them. But I need a support system for that. And I need help with that because it's hard. It's tough. It was tough when they were 2. It was tough when they were 3 months. It was tough when they were 15. And it's tough now that they're in their 20s. So please do those things as well. This is an example of what social emotional work looks like as an adult. My wonderful oldest child gave me permission to use this today. I went to see him. He lives in another state last winter. I think it was February or March. And this was actually out. He had it on a whiteboard, and it filled my heart with happiness and love that he had it on there, because it showed that all the things I say, that sometimes he listens to them. But you can see they are focused on physical ways of caring for himself, drinking water, eating breakfast, intellectual ways of taking care of himself, reading, writing, physical ways, emotional ways, love someone more than yourself, felt your feelings, spiritual, meditating, all those pieces that go with being human and being part of the world. When they were little, I did not worry about the intellectual piece. They were avid learners, and I knew that they were going to learn what they wanted to. Even if, things weren't perfect in an educational environment, they were going to learn. What I did worry about is, would they be able to stand in line and wait patiently? Would they be able to drive on the interstate and not lose their cool? Would they be able to have friends and partners as they were adults and have meaningful relationships and get along with other people and make the world a better place? And that is what, as a mom, I focused on, rather the intellectual piece. This is a picture of the talk less, smile more, his reminder that he has. And I love this quote so much. Every time I read it, it makes me feel a little emotional and validated. And I hope you feel the same way. And it is definitely something, especially as adolescents get older, something that they can read and understand. So I'll let you read that. And these are some resources that are available. These are just some websites. I think most of you are probably familiar with all of them. I think they're great, and they always have so many things on there. Super sensibilities, understanding your super senses, rather than calling them overexcitabilities. Dr. Fahrenkopf brilliantly called them sensational sensibilities. So they come this is the card pack, the deck of cards. There's also a book that goes with that. There are also many, many wonderful, wonderful books. Living with Intensity is one of my favorites. There are lots of them. And if anyone wants to contact me about anything in particular book-wise, I can send that to you. Or if you have something specific, a specific question or challenge you would like to talk about, email me. I love to talk, as you can see. So what I would do is email you back, and we'd schedule a time to have a conversation. And that's what I have today. Thank you so much for inviting me. And I hope that someone found something that was helpful in their journey as a mom or dad of gifted children.